All right. Well, Mary, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to hear from you. And our team was also just chatting about it. They're like, tell us more about Gen Z and all the things you're seeing in the fintech world and all these good things. So, before we get into all of that, I'm just going to hand it over to you. Can you just share folks a little bit, share with folks a little bit about your background, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's been I hear people say this and it's also true for me. It's been a series of accidents. The only non-accident was I pursued journalism
Mm.
and moved to New York City for a job in jewelry writing at the time. But one thing led to another and I ended up being a blogger covering bank innovation in 2008. From there,
Oh,
I jumped. I know I was early
like what
days
a
where
time.
what a time. Yeah. It was like, what's happening? No one knows
Right.
what we're talking about, but that's okay. It was really,
Interesting.
it got me meeting people, that really went on to huge things. So it's like fun looking back. But yeah, then I went to American Banker, editing op-eds and covering fintech for the brand. And then from there, Bankrate. And today I'm at Cornerstone as an editor at large and shape their content strategy. And I also host a fintech podcast called Money Isn't Everything.
Super awesome. So lots of experience in the banking world, fintech. It sounds like you've also had some really like interesting conversations just from day one with your journalism background. So
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I know recently you've put together a report specifically around Gen Z and the fintech world, and I love to just for us unpack that. What are you seeing in particular for the Gen Z audience? Because I feel like it's a different beast, and it's a different type of communication, different ways of engaging, and like what is the landscape that you're currently seeing out there as it relates to this demographic and then also the the fintech world.
Yeah. So I like to call them the under 30s.
Yeah.
And I'm a millennial. And so I think back to like when I was of like their age. And some things are very similar. It's just because this new generation doesn't mean
Yeah.
everything's changed. And this one's such a broad one. It's like very, very, very diverse. But certainly they're bringing like fun things to the work world. You can hear a lot of like the older people are very mystified by Gen Z, and
Yes.
especially in banking circles, they're like, what's a care day or whatever. But I think it's like really important. And I think previous generations have not been so forthcoming about like what they need for themselves to actually perform
Yep.
well. And I
Yep.
think Gen Z is like bringing it just in the way they're bringing their fabulous skincare.
Yes.
I'm like, what? How many oils? I should have done that.
Oh, I
So
love it.
I think it's really fun in that way. And of course, they're treating work differently. Like you're seeing Gen Z really double up on jobs, not only for money, but like here's my creative passion. I'm
Totally.
pursuing this as I'm also doing this corporate job, and work and life balance seems to be a bigger goal.
Hmm.
And for money, so the report that you referenced, we partnered with Fritch, which is it's a fintech company that's targeting Gen Z and
Yep.
pairing with like credit unions to get Gen Z to them, since most credit
Hmm.
unions don't have young members.
Hmm.
Um, and you see a lot of things that like would be true of most people. Let's say what just target it to like graduating college. They're worried about their first job. Um, they're not, and it's interesting. One of the questions Fritch was asking a handful of Gen Z people were, what number do you think you need to make to be happy? And, some people said um, three-figure salary, but others were just like, 50,000 or something like that. So it's like, you're in your early financial story. You don't really know what's going on yet.
Right.
You're
Right.
probably still getting assistance from parents, maybe. Um, and when you get that first job, it's very overwhelming to know what you're doing with that money. I
Yep.
didn't really have that experience. I did journalism and
Yeah.
it was a low amount. I was like, okay, all
Yeah.
allocation to bills. But people pursuing higher earning jobs from like when they're really young, they're
Right.
like, where do I put the savings? How
Right.
much do I put in savings? And so on.
Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, it makes sense. I can see the parallels, regardless of generation, right? But
Hmm.
it's really interesting to hear that, especially when you talk about like working multiple jobs, like you said, work-life balance and bringing that forward. I want to get into the component you mentioned about credit unions. That was really
Yeah.
interesting and trying to be able to, kind of like engage with this group more. What
Mhm.
are you seeing along that trend? Are there certain like channels that banks are using or credit unions are using? Are there like communication channels or types of ways that they're going about to be able to engage this audience, or even like their employee benefit kind of offering? Is that changing the landscape? What are you seeing on that front?
Well, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of need to improve in this area because it's definitely like you need to do a big social media push
Mhm.
for this audience. And I would say, um, historically, well, less so credit unions, but certainly I'd still put them in this bracket. Like it's just a little bit more formal. The communication, the language used, save for your retirement, all this stuff. But like what's been happening, fintech has been pushing it to a more casual way on social media. If you follow like Chime on TikTok, for example, it's just like fun. It's like showcasing, 3 payday months or something like in a fun way.
Yeah.
And giving tips. So I would encourage the industry to be a little bit more casual and fun,
Yeah.
and try out some short form videos because that's what's needed in pursuit of this audience.
So we have a client we worked with for a really long time, and their
Hmm.
CEO always had this rule of like no boring content. Like, and we would do stuff that was sales focused, but we'd also have some stuff that was just kind of like wild and out there. And they're in the
Hmm.
financial services world. Um, it was goofy, but it was fun, right? It was like humanizing. What are
Yeah.
you seeing as like a line that credit unions or others are sort of toting, that there's that like balance for the formality because this is a really serious topic, but there's also the need to be relatable and human. Are
Hmm.
you seeing uh like more video content that's coming out? Are you seeing more infographics? How are you? It's like you mentioned kind of like voice and tone, right? Of like the copy that's being rolled out. What kind of pieces are you seeing or would encourage companies to utilize to kind of, like, for lack of better words, humanize or kind of
Hmm.
like add that like that pizzazz or that like that personality to the brand?
I think the best examples, I really do think this is just an area that needs improvement almost across the board from the financial
Yep.
institution perspective. But like,
You know,
when they partner with fintechs, then the fintech is bringing like the playful marketing. But like, you've got to think about like stage of life, right? So
totally.
one thing is like, this is something interesting about Gen Z, like their openness to sharing their salaries, what they make,
Mhm.
and just being more transparent about like the numbers with their friends and family, just to
Yeah.
what has been like this secret is
Yeah.
it's coming out. And I
Yeah.
think that's really cool. But like, one of the things, like one of the topics, think about like what's the average amount someone spends on a date, that kind of thing. Like that's like money things that would be
Right.
on their mind.
Yep. Oh, that's such good examples. Just like, well, just like basic marketing. You meet them where they are, right?
Yeah.
What's like top of their mind and getting to know them and unpacking that more too. What are you seeing in the fintech space? Is there any like just like pushing sort of the creative envelope digitally or trying to build more communities? Are there interesting things going on there?
Well, some of it's just like, growth from what has already existed. Because if you think about it, like this is like the generation that grew up where Venmo would have been on their phone most of their
Yeah.
life, or a Cash App, or that kind of thing. So, like those brands, which are massive brands, have a lot of this audience. But
Hmm.
now you're starting to see some fintechs pop up and they're like, I am specific to Gen Z.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't say this isn't so creative, but it is something that's happening. They're like linking up with college ambassadors to help spread the like, hey, here's this fun money app, blah blah blah.
Yep.
And I think that's cool. And larger than that, you mentioned community, and that's something I've been seeing happen just like across the ages. Actually, like there's
Great.
a startup called Altro.
Mm-hmm.
That's working to help people improve their credit scores.
Mm-hmm.
But on their app, they have like live events where people drop in to hear about important topics. And then it's like the members are sharing their money hacks
Oh,
with each other. So it's sort of like, yeah, like a little mini mint community, a little Reddit
yeah.
popping up on these
Like
different
study
fintech
group
apps.
if you want a more formal
Yeah.
title, but like there's a transparency element. So
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, which also aligns with what you were saying earlier of like you just put it out there. There's not this sort of like money story that's sort of in the back of your mind of like, okay, I can't share that, I don't want to be transparent, but it's putting it out there in a safe way.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Um, what as you kind of like look ahead, is there any trends, especially from this research that you saw, or things that you like? I think about AI, right?
Mhm.
How are these kinds of things impacting what's to come in the years to come?
Well, I'll track it just from like personal finance tips. So, I'm someone who used to work at Bankrate, which I covered fintech. So it was a different role, but they have such evergreen personal finance writing, as do banks, as do credit unions. What is a checking account? And honestly, that's like a piece of content you need, especially now because people don't know. um, but
36.
yeah, but
Yeah,
AI can write that in a heartbeat, right? And
yeah,
and maybe better because
mhm,
it's like really dull. It's really dull writing, and
yeah.
honestly, usually it's like entry level people writing a lot of the content. So, the AI might actually get it
Spice it
better.
up. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
like the AI for FAQs.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's also good for SEO too. So it's
yeah.
kind of like a win-win from all the sides of things. And then
Hmm.
I guess if you were to take that content and then put it also forward in more of an entertaining way or like a digestible way, I think about like the Instagram, just feeds that come through that, like you said, like quick trips, tips, bulleting, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
and Lauren, one thing about Gen Z is, there's this return to, I don't know, nostalgia, things they never experienced, right? So it's
right.
like you saw, I think it started happening last year, maybe even before, but like these, under 30s wanting to do envelope budgeting as their strategy because it's like the physicality, because they're
Yeah,
so
miss
used to the
that.
abs. Yeah. So I think
Mhm.
an opportunity looking ahead is like, oh, there's a lot to be commented on. What's the point of a branch kind of thing? But I think there would be an opportunity to bring some kind of lively event,
Yep.
and target Gen Z specifically.
Yeah, that's fair. I think kind of getting back to some of the things we've been like, especially growing up
Yeah.
in a generation that's so digital first with
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
Missing that like either human or like you said, the physical touch
The
component.
physical
So,
touch. Like if you
yeah.
even look like a TikTok, like there's a Gen Z woman who went viral for just reading the newspaper, like the physical newspaper. It's like, how do you, I don't
Yep.
know. I guess it's like things you might have missed.
Yep. That's fair. It's like the idea of holding a book, right? So
Yeah,
being
which
able
I
to,
still do.
yes.
But that's because I love underlying.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I know I was in a
Hmm.
conversation with someone yesterday and we were talking about moving to Kindles, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, but there's this idea of being able to write things down and you can't miss
Write
out.
things down and like give your eyeballs a break from the screen.
Yeah. Oh, it's all these little things. So
Mhm.
super interesting. Any other thoughts you want to share or resources for folks that you think might be helpful?
Well, I think one thing that's probably helpful to this audience is that, in our research, we did discover that like where are, Gen Z going for their financial advice? And, I thought TikTok would be at the top of the list, but it's there, it's present. But family was very like the biggest category, followed by friends, and
Interesting.
then followed by your bank or credit union. You could
Wow.
check multiple, but the family was like overwhelming.
So that was the trusted source for going
The
to getting financial
trusted
advice.
source. Yeah,
Mhm. Oh, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
sure.
Yeah, and I see that too. We work with a lot of wealth management firms, and we see referrals come in. A lot of it comes
Mhm.
from family and friends, right? And
Hmm.
then trusted advisors, which is probably no surprise, but it's interesting to see that across the board. Also, to your comment earlier, see across the board this need for community and kind
Hmm.
of desire for community. So,
Yeah,
wonder if that's just,
especially the
yeah, go ahead. I
pandemic, of
was just
course.
gonna
Like,
say, yeah,
like people want some, like we can't all just be locked in a room.
yeah. Oh my gosh, so good. Well, thank you so much for sharing these insights. We'll make sure to include a link as well below to that report that you had mentioned and any of the
Perfect.
resources. So this was super fun. It's
It
glad to,
was fun.
yeah, hear from you and just kind of like dive into all of it. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.